snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a new type of video. I am going to be starting a series which is going to be called Kaitlin Recommends. It's very similar to Lindsay Recommends from Lindsay Ray's channel, where I'm just going to give you guys some recommendations of the different categories of books. So there will be all sorts of different categories, and some of them I have lots of suggestions, some of them I only have a few, but always I would love you guys to give me any recommendations if there are any books in that genre or category that I don't mention that you guys love. Definitely let me know, and I would absolutely love to hear all of your thoughts about everything I tell you guys about. The first one that I'm planning to do is Kaitlin Recommends Dystopian Fiction. I used to read a lot more dystopian than I do now, and I still find dystopian very, very interesting. Some dystopians can be really original. I think there are quite a lot of good YA dystopians out there, which is not something I read a lot of, and when I do tend to read YA, dystopian is one of those subgenres that I love to read, because I do tend to find that dystopian YA is just something I enjoy. Although I have read a few adult dystopians as well, so I'm going to give you guys a list of 10 different dystopian books that I have read and I would recommend to you. The first one that I would recommend is actually a young adult series, and this series starts off with The Selection, and this is by Kira Cass. I really enjoy this series. It's set in a world where there are different numbers, and depending on what number of society you are, depends on what jobs you can get. For example, royalty is number 1, which means they are at the top of the hierarchy, and then it goes all the way down to I think 7 or maybe 8. When we join this story, the prince is eligible to be married and he needs to pick a wife, and the way that they select who is going to marry royalty in this world is by holding a selection, which essentially means various different eligible girls can apply, and they go in and have massive interviews and get put through all sorts of things in order to basically fall in love with the prince. It's very, very similar to the idea of The Bachelor, the TV show, if you guys have seen that. It's really fluffy, it's really light, and it's quite a lot on romance. So if that's not your thing, definitely don't check it out. But it is set in a world where there is essentially a dystopian culture which is divided up into numbers, and we also have an ongoing war that is kind of a subplot of the main series. So for me, this series is just kind of a guilty pleasure. I really enjoy it, but it's not substantial in terms of character development or anything like that. It is just a fun read. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, definitely give it a go. I gave the first one 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on, I then have an adult dystopian that I'm going to recommend to you guys, and that is the Silo series, which is by Hugh Howey, beginning with Wool. Wool is a very interesting story because it is set in a world where there are very few people left, and there's a big disaster that no one really knows what happened, and everyone lives in this one silo which is underground. You can work on different levels of the silo. There's quite a lot of different levels, and people go up and down in the silo for their jobs, but most people tend to stick in their certain area because it's such a massive underground silo that it's basically like their world. No one is allowed to go outside because they don't know what's out there, and everyone thinks that they are going to die if they go out, but you can see outside if you're at the very, very top, and certain people, such as criminals, if they have been really bad or if they just want to die, things like that, they get flushed out the silo and they have to go out into the world in a suit, which inevitably fails and they unfortunately die. We follow a young lady in this silo, and she discovers that, of course, things are not quite as they seem. Perhaps there is a lot more going on about the origin of the silo that the inhabitants don't actually know, and her storyline I felt was incredibly well done. It was very, very inventive, and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought she was a great character as well. This one's a bit longer than the Selection one, which is YA, so it is actually pretty developed, and I do think that the series is going to continue to be very, very good. I gave the first one 4 out of 5 stars, and I do have the second and third waiting for me to pick them up. The next book that I would recommend to you guys is Battle Royale, which is by Koshin Takami. This is a book that is based in Japan, and it's based in a society which is pretty normal, but they have this thing called the Battle Royale where a certain class or a certain year group gets selected to go into the Battle Royale, and they have to kill each other in brutal ways. It's very, very graphic indeed. There are a lot of gruesome scenes, but it's so action-packed. Again, this is an adult book, it's not a YA one. It does have similar ideas to the Hunger Games in that it's everyone trying to kill each other, but this one is so much more graphic, and there's a lot more in terms of the friendships that people have, because it's a class. It's not just random people killing each other. They are a class of people. They think that they have friends and things like that. So I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was very, very good, and I actually ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars, so I would definitely highly recommend it to you guys if you don't mind a bit of blood and gore and violence. Next I have Unwind, which is by Neil Schusterman, and this is part of the Unwind dystology, and I really enjoyed this book and I really want to get back into this series. I read it quite a long time ago and I really enjoyed it. It's about this world where basically all children have to be able to live until they're 13. So no one is allowed to kill off their children or have an abortion or anything like that. Every child is allowed to live until they are 13 years old, and then when they reach the age of 13, their parents are then allowed to decide whether they want to keep the child and raise them as part of the family, or if they want to send them off to be unwound. And basically that means having all of their organs taken out of them and used as kind of backup for medical things and so on. And we follow a young boy who, unbeknownst to him, has been sent to be unwound by his parents. He was not expecting it and he doesn't know what to do. And the adventure he goes on trying to get away and trying to escape and trying to basically stop the society that this is, because it's not really a nice idea. I love this book. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. I really want to continue on with the series. I do have the second one, so I will be picking that up sometime soon. Next we have Ashes, which is by Ilse J. Bick. This is a fairly typical dystopian YA in that it's about a world where people have suddenly been killed off by a massive electromagnetic pulse, and they've kind of gone into a zombie-like form, and all of the computerized things have obviously died as well, so there's no way to contact one another. And we follow 3 main characters, Alex, Tom and Ellie, who are all young teenagers, and they have to basically try and get through this world just after this electromagnetic pulse has happened, and they face a lot of different things, such as zombie people and nasty things, and not being able to communicate with everyone. So it was a really enjoyable story. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars, so it's not my favourite of all of them, but it's still definitely worth reading, and it is a series that I would be interested in picking up the next one for. There is love interest in this book though, so if that's not really your thing, maybe don't give it a go. Next I have one that a lot of you guys will probably already know but may not have actually read, and that is The Maze Runner, which is by James Dashner. This recently came out in a film. You may have seen that. I really love the books. I think that the books in this series are just really, really good. I know it's very mixed opinions. Some people seem to really like them and some people don't. I'm one of those who does really enjoy this series. It basically focuses on the concept that there are a large group of boys and they are trapped in the middle of this gigantic maze. And this maze changes every night, and they get locked into their central area where they have to make their home, cook food that they hunt and things like that. So they have to be self-sustainable whilst also being young kids and trying to deal with the stresses of the world. They don't know how to get away from the maze. One day there is a new boy who is put into the maze, and we follow this new boy's perspective as he adjusts to the way of the maze. He doesn't remember his past life, he doesn't understand how he got there, and the biggest concern of all of the boys is that they want to escape, but they don't know how because the maze is ever changing. There's some great monsters in this book and I really enjoyed the concept. I felt like it was a really fun, fast-paced series and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, so definitely check that one out if you've not read the book. I would highly recommend them. Next I have one that I've not actually heard a lot of people talking about, but again it is a YA dystopian, and this is The Forsaken, which is by Lisa M. Stass. I really enjoyed this book when I read it, and I was not expecting to because I'd never heard of it. I love the cover as well. I think the cover's beautiful. This story is about a young girl called Elena who had her parents taken by the police when she was very young. So she's always tried her best to fit into the society and be a part of it and blend in. But when every kid in this society reaches the age of 16, they have to undergo a test, and that test basically looks at whether or not they have violent tendencies and are likely to hurt people of the society. And if they do have violent tendencies, which of course our main character does, whether she thought she would or not, she ends up getting sent to the Wheel, which is basically an island where people who are criminals or would-be criminals are sent to try and live out their lives with a lot of harsh conditions and a lot of monsters and civil war and makeshift homes and all sorts of things like that. I really loved this story. I thought it was really, really fun. Again, this is one that I ended up giving a 5 out of 5 stars to and really would recommend if you do want to pick up a new YA dystopian. And I definitely need to continue on with that series because that is one that I always think about when I think of dystopian YA, and I really want to know what happens next. Next I have The Disappeared, which is by CJ Harper. Again, this is a YA dystopian, most of these are, and this is set in a world where kids are segregated into different schools. So we have the really high achieving kids who are put into special schools, learning communities, and then we have the people who are not as intelligent as those in the learning communities, and they are basically put into prison-like local academies. We follow a person named Jackson who is actually a very high achiever, and he has constantly lived in the good elite world, but one day he and his friend are sent to deliver a package which results in his friend dying. Jackson is heartbroken and goes back to the learning community to talk to someone and find out what's going on and how this happened. All of his teachers claim not to know him, and he is put into lower end of the world where everything is rather nasty, and one of the local academy prison-like places where he has to try and escape. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars, but it's still a really good read, and if you do like a quick, fast-paced and intelligent book, then this one has elements of that, and it's not too much of a love interest, but there is a bit. Next I am going to recommend The Program, which is by Suzanne Young. This is again a YA dystopian, and this one focuses on a character called Sloane. Sloane lives in a world where feelings are forbidden. You're not allowed to show your feelings, and teen suicide is basically an epidemic in this world. The only solution that the characters in this world have been able to find for this epidemic of suicide is The Program, which is basically a program or therapy treatment that people get put through, and supposedly when they are put through it they will come back and they will be fine to be integrated back into society without any hopes of suicide or even thinking that sort of thing. But of course, when these people come back from the program, they seem completely alien and different and nasty, and no one really gets them. They don't seem like their original selves, and no one really wants to integrate with them. And basically all of them have their depression completely gone, but also their memories. Sloane does the best that she can to fit into the society. The only person that she can rely on is her friend James, and together they are trying to keep each other out of the program. But of course, depression is slowly settling in, as it would do in a society this regimented, and they're finding it very, very difficult to kind of hide that and keep their emotions at bay. Things start to go downhill, and she is faced with the possibility of getting into the program and seeing what it's all really about. And I ended up giving that one a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final one that I'm going to recommend to you guys is one of the classic dystopian books, and probably one of the more original dystopian books, which is by George Orwell, and this is 1984, which I'm sure loads of you guys will have heard of. It is set in this world where people are suppressed by Big Brother, who is essentially the ruler, and people are not really allowed to have freedom of speech. There is a whole new language that has been developed called Newspeak, which eradicates any expression of one's feelings. You cannot say, "I was really excited," or anything like that. Things have been condensed to the simplest form to allow the least amount of expression from people who live in the world. And there's a lot of other elements that all combine into the story. And we follow a man named Winston who is basically trying his best to fit into the society, and he's quite happy in his society until he meets another young lady, and then he starts to realise that the ways of the world are perhaps not as good and happy and charming as he thought they were, and maybe he should test what he lives by a little bit more and kind of understand a bit more about who he is and what he lives by and whether or not the world that he lives in is right. And I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I would definitely recommend that you read that if you're into adult books, and certainly it's worth reading for everyone. I really enjoyed it, and I don't tend to read a lot of classics, but this one I would definitely recommend. Those are my hopefully not too long and rambly suggestions of dystopian books that you guys can pick up and that I have read and would recommend. All of them got 4 or above on my star ratings on Goodreads, and I will link all of my Goodreads reviews for each of them down below so that you guys can go and check them out if you want. I would absolutely love to know if you guys have read any of these books, or what you thought of them, or what you think of this format of a video generally, because I will not just be doing dystopian, I will be doing loads. I have a lot of other ideas that I plan on doing, especially fantasy and fantasy subgenres, so don't worry, I will be doing a lot of fantasy suggestions. I'm just still compiling the lists because there are so many that I could recommend to you guys. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.